It started with a single question, not a hostile one, not even one meant to provoke. But it struck a nerve so deep that for a few long seconds, the entire room forgot how to breathe. "Are you a mother, Meghan?" Those 5 words, uttered softly by Courtney Adamo, her old Northwestern University sorority sister and longtime friend, brought the Duchess of Sussex to an awkward standstill. Cameras clicked. A baby giggled somewhere in the corner, and Meghan's polished, carefully rehearsed charm began to fracture, just enough for the mask to slip. She blinked, smiled too quickly, laughed, but not naturally. You could almost hear the internal panic. The silence in the small California bookstore, ironically named Godmother's, was deafening. She wasn't expecting that question, at least not from someone who knew her before the palace, before the tabloids, before the facade of motherhood had become a global debate. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What happened next wasn't just uncomfortable, it was revealing. Because for the first time in years, Meghan Markle didn't have a script. Picture the scene. Godmother's bookstore in Montecito, California. A sunny Saturday afternoon, early fall. The air smelled of coffee, fresh paper, and expensive perfume. Dozens of guests, mostly women, gathered for what was billed as an afternoon with Meghan Markle and friends, a casual discussion about her approach to entertaining, motherhood, and creative living. The kind of event that feels warm, curated, safe. Meghan was radiant, wearing a soft beige silk blouse, minimal jewelry, her hair cascading in the signature glossy waves. Every move felt choreographed, until it didn't. Courtney Adamo sat across from her, microphone in hand. She wasn't just a friend. She was the kind of friend who knew where the real stories were buried. They had shared dorm rooms, campus gossip, cheap wine. Courtney had no reason to ambush her, or did she? The first half hour went smoothly. Meghan spoke passionately about her cookbook, her calm chaos approach to entertaining, the importance of authenticity. The crowd nodded along. But beneath the laughter and polished charm, there was tension, a tightrope between image and truth. Then, as Courtney shifted the topic toward family, something changed in the air. "You've built such a beautiful life here in California," Courtney said. "You're a wife, a mother, an activist. But when you think about motherhood, what's been the most defining moment for you as a mom?" It was an innocent enough question, but Meghan froze. Her eyes darted sideways, as though looking for approval, for a cue, for permission. There was a pause, 2 seconds too long. Then a shaky laugh. "Oh, motherhood. It's wonderful," she said. "It's everything, really." Her tone was warm but hollow, like a line rehearsed one too many times. Courtney leaned in. "You know, we all love your stories about home life, but you've been quite private about the kids. Archie and Lilibet, how are they doing?" And just like that, the air snapped. Meghan smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "They're thriving," she said quickly, sipping her water. "We try to give them as normal a life as possible." Another pause. The kind that makes you wonder if something's being hidden in plain sight. "That's why we don't show them much. It's about protecting them." A few polite nods, a soft clap. But Courtney wasn't done. Her voice softened, more personal this time. "I understand. But just between us, are you a mother in the way you imagined you'd be?" The question lingered. The crowd tensed. It wasn't an accusation. It was curiosity layered with something deeper. A challenge. The kind of question that only someone who remembers you before the fame would dare ask. Meghan shifted in her chair, adjusted her sleeves, looked at Courtney, then the crowd, then back at her lap. "That's a really interesting question," she murmured, almost whispering. "Motherhood is complicated. It's transformative." Her smile quivered slightly. In that moment, the disconnect was palpable. The woman who built her public persona around empathy and authenticity suddenly seemed unsure. Because for years, whispers had followed her wherever she went. Were Archie and Lilibet real? Were they her biological children? Why did no credible birth records exist? Why were public appearances so rare, almost non-existent? The bookstore event was supposed to be a PR masterstroke, a warm, relatable conversation to remind the world that Meghan was still human beneath the headlines. But that single question cracked the illusion. Now imagine being in that audience. The uncomfortable laughter, the subtle glances exchanged between guests. Some smiled out of politeness. Others whispered to one another. Did she just dodge that question? Even the staff noticed, the assistant at the corner discreetly gesturing for the next question, trying to rescue the flow. But Courtney didn't move on immediately. She looked at Meghan, really looked at her, as if silently asking, "Why are you so afraid to answer?" What made it all the more intriguing was how quickly the clip spread online afterward. Within hours, hashtags like #AreYouAMother and #Meghan Markle Bookstore trended across social media. Viewers re-watched the footage, slowing down Meghan's reaction, analyzing her body language. "Look at the micro-expression at 3:27, one Twitter user wrote. "That's guilt or panic." Another commented, "She froze because it was too close to the truth." But the real question wasn't why she hesitated. It was what she was hiding. And that's where this story deepens. Let's rewind for a moment. Meghan and Courtney weren't just casual acquaintances. They were close once, inseparable during their college years. Courtney Adamo was known for her bohemian charm, later becoming a respected influencer and mother of 5. She built her brand around family, honesty, and motherhood. So when she agreed to moderate Meghan's bookstore event, many saw it as a nostalgic reunion between old friends. But those who knew Courtney knew one thing. She valued truth over diplomacy. If she asked a hard question, it wasn't for the cameras. It was for clarity. So why that question? Why are you a mother? Instead of how are your children? There's a world of difference between the two. One challenges identity. The other assumes it. Rumors had already been circulating for years. Some claimed Meghan's pregnancies were surrogacies disguised as natural births. Others believed the children were kept hidden for legal or security reasons. But it was the contradictions, statements that didn't align, birth certificates that vanished from public records, that fueled doubt. And on that stage, all those whispers condensed into one simple, devastating question. The irony? Meghan had chosen Godmother's Bookstore for a reason. The name itself carried symbolism, nurture, protection, legacy. She wanted to project motherhood as her defining role. But fate had other plans. Because that's the moment the illusion began to unravel. As the event concluded, Meghan thanked everyone with her trademark grace. Cameras flashed, fans lined up for autographs, but Courtney's eyes followed her friend, unreadable. Later, someone close to the event staff would whisper that Meghan confronted Courtney backstage. "You weren't supposed to go there," Meghan allegedly said, her voice trembling, not in anger, but in fear. Courtney reportedly replied, "You said you wanted authenticity. I thought we were being honest." That private exchange would later become the spark behind a storm no one saw coming. By the next day, entertainment blogs dissected every second of the interaction. Some defended Meghan, saying she was ambushed by a manipulative question. Others insisted Courtney had done what journalists never could: hold Meghan accountable for her own narrative. The footage was reposted, slowed, filtered, even lip-read. Analysts called it the most revealing silence of Meghan's career. But what made this story explode wasn't just Meghan's awkward reaction, it was what happened after. According to multiple sources, within 48 hours, the bookstore received a series of requests from Meghan's representatives. They asked for the recording to be taken down, citing privacy and copyright concerns. The store refused, saying the event was public. Hours later, the video disappeared mysteriously from their YouTube channel, gone without explanation. That's when the conspiracy theories reignited. Who made it disappear? What was Meghan trying to hide? Was there more to the conversation than the public saw? And somewhere in Montecito, Courtney Adamo went silent. She didn't post, didn't comment, didn't clarify. But silence, as we've learned with Meghan Markle, often says more than words. Behind the scenes, whispers started circulating that Adamo's question wasn't random at all. Some claimed she had been encouraged by certain royal sympathizers or media figures to subtly test Meghan's authenticity. Others believed it was genuine, an old friend simply trying to reconnect through honesty. Whatever the case, the aftermath was undeniable. Meghan's image as the devoted mother, the compassionate duchess, was shaken. It's almost poetic, isn't it? That the woman who built her brand around control lost it over the simplest question imaginable. Are you a mother? 5 words that sliced through layers of strategy and PR armor. And yet, this moment was just the beginning. Because as the story spread, people began digging into birth records, into archived photos, into timelines that didn't quite align, into the inconsistencies surrounding those 2 mysterious royal children. Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana. Why were there so few verifiable details? Why did even hospital staff remain anonymous? Why did palace insiders, when pressed, dodge questions about their public appearances? What started as an innocent conversation at a bookstore had opened Pandora's box. And now, it wasn't just Meghan's credibility on the line. It was something far deeper, the narrative of motherhood itself. The public began asking questions the media had long avoided. Is Meghan really raising those children? Why do none of her friends ever mention them? Could it be possible that Archie and Lilibet are symbolic? In that quiet Montecito bookstore, beneath the soft lights and scripted smiles, truth accidentally collided with performance. Meghan's laughter faltered. Courtney's gaze lingered. And the audience, many of them mothers themselves, sensed that something didn't quite add up. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was intuition. But everyone in that room felt it. The energy shift, the unspoken tension. The Duchess, who always had the right words, suddenly couldn't find any. And that's where this story truly begins. Because while Meghan thought she could control the narrative, one question from an old friend had done what years of headlines couldn't. It exposed the fracture between her image and her truth. But the story didn't end at that bookstore. In fact, that moment was only the trigger for a series of revelations that would spiral far beyond California, far beyond friendship, and deep into the heart of royal secrecy itself. Because as you'll soon see, Courtney Adamo's question wasn't just a moment of curiosity. It was the first domino, the one that set everything else in motion. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It was supposed to be lighthearted, an afternoon of laughter, nostalgia, and warmth. But somewhere between the laughter and the lattes, everything shifted. That bookstore in Montecito, Godmother's, would never be the same again. Imagine the air thick with the faint smell of candle wax and espresso, guests sitting cross-legged on woven rugs, notebooks open, pens ready. The topic of the day was entertaining with purpose. Meghan had been in her element, performing, charming, carefully choosing every word to sound effortlessly relatable. She had the audience in the palm of her hand. And then Courtney Adamo leaned forward with that gentle, almost innocent smile and said, "Meghan, are you a mother?" The question landed like a thunderclap. It wasn't what was asked, it was how it was asked. Calm, direct, no cushioning, no flattery. It pierced through the air and hung there, vibrating in silence. For a few seconds, you could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Then the world stopped. Meghan blinked twice, the practiced smile faltering. She leaned back slightly, crossed her legs, and gave a small laugh that sounded more like a cough. "Well, yes, of course," she said. "I think all mothers know that it's the greatest joy." Her tone wavered on that last word. Joy, the one emotion that should come effortlessly to any loving mother, sounded strained, almost mechanical. Her fingers fidgeted with her bracelet, the gold catching the light just as her composure slipped. Courtney smiled softly, nodding. "I know, it's a big question," she said, her voice soothing, almost protective. "But I mean, what's been your most real moment as a mom? The messy, honest parts." Meghan looked down, her lips parting as if to speak, but nothing came out. Instead, she exhaled, long and slow, then said, "Motherhood it's something I hold sacred." She paused again. "And I think it's important to protect that." The words felt vague, evasive, rehearsed. The audience, polite as ever, gave a gentle round of applause, but the energy had shifted. The laughter that had once filled the room was gone. The buzz of excitement dimmed into an uneasy quiet. People glanced at each other, sensing that something significant had just happened, something unscripted. A journalist sitting in the back later described it perfectly. It was like watching a stage actress suddenly forget her lines. Let's pause there. When was the last time Meghan Markle forgot her lines? Every appearance, every interview, every podcast, rehearsed, edited, sanitized. The Duchess was a master of image control. But that question, 5 simple words, slipped past her defenses. The irony of it all, this wasn't a journalist trying to catch her off guard. It was an old friend, someone she trusted, someone who remembered her before the tiaras and the titles. And maybe that's what made it sting more. Because it wasn't asked to expose, it was asked to understand. But understanding isn't always welcome when there's something to hide. For the rest of that discussion, Meghan seemed off balance. Her voice softened. She started using filler phrases. You know, it's just about gratitude. We're very blessed, but never truly answered the question. Not once did she offer a single personal anecdote about her children. No mention of bedtime stories, favorite snacks, or family moments. Just platitudes. Courtney, perhaps sensing the discomfort, tried to move on. You've talked a lot about intentional living, she said, glancing at her notes. What's a moment with your kids that really grounded you in that? And that's when Meghan said something that made the audience's heads tilt in confusion. Oh, I think what grounds me most is being around children in general, she said. Their innocence, their energy, it reminds me why I do what I do. Being around children in general. Not my children. Not Archie and Lilibet. The phrasing was odd, detached, almost clinical. It wasn't the way mothers usually speak. And the crowd noticed. A woman in the second row reportedly whispered, "Did she just say children? Not her children?" One moment. One sentence. And suddenly the narrative began to crack. After the event, when the first clips began circulating online, users picked up on it instantly. She's deflecting. She's nervous. She doesn't talk like a mom. Comments flooded in, dissecting her every pause, every gesture. Someone slowed down the footage to reveal Meghan's right hand trembling slightly as she tucked her hair behind her ear. Others noticed the tightening of her jaw. Body language experts were quick to chime in. One analyst said, "Her smile disappears exactly 1 second after the question lands." That's the moment of cognitive dissonance, when truth and performance collide. But there's something deeper here, something almost poetic. For years, Meghan has used motherhood as both shield and sword, shielding herself from criticism, wielding it when she needs to humanize her image. As a mother, she often begins in interviews, before launching into emotional appeals about compassion, privacy, and trauma. But on that day, when the label itself was questioned, the foundation wobbled. Because titles mean nothing if they aren't rooted in truth. And here's where it gets fascinating. Multiple sources claim that Meghan's team had provided pre-approved questions for the discussion. Safe, flattering, surface-level topics. But Courtney's question wasn't on the list. Which begs the question, did she go rogue? Or did she know something the public didn't? When asked later, the bookstore manager simply said, "Courtney asked what she wanted to ask. We didn't interfere." What's more intriguing is that a few attendees reported seeing Meghan whisper something to her assistant during the applause, something like, "Why did she ask that?" The assistant reportedly shrugged. Within minutes, Meghan's team had already started damage control. That tells you everything. Even before the public backlash began, even before the clips went viral, Meghan sensed the danger. Because that question, so small, so casual, struck at the very narrative she had built her post-royal life upon. The doting mother, the protective parent, the symbol of modern womanhood. And when that image faltered, so did the illusion of control. Let's talk about that illusion for a moment. Meghan has always been in control of lighting, camera angles, interview questions, even her public laughter. But here, in a cozy California bookstore, surrounded by friendly faces, control slipped away. Some attendees later described it as a shift in atmosphere. One said, "It felt like the room got colder." Another claimed that Meghan's voice grew quieter, as if she was trying to shrink inside herself. "It was the first time she looked small," the witness said. Now, let's not pretend this was just a social slip-up. The moment had layers. Because what followed wasn't just embarrassment, it was panic. Meghan ended the event earlier than planned, citing tight scheduling. She left through a side exit. Her team stayed behind, instructing staff not to share any behind-the-scenes photos. Why such urgency over an innocent question? Because maybe it wasn't innocent at all. Maybe it was a test. Whispers began almost immediately. Rumors that Courtney Adamo hadn't asked on impulse, but on purpose. That someone had encouraged her to press Meghan on motherhood, not to embarrass her, but to observe her reaction. Because reactions tell truths that words can't. And what a reaction it was. Later that evening, social media exploded. Hashtags multiplied. News outlets picked it up. Online sleuths began connecting dots that had long been ignored. They pulled up archived footage, statements, inconsistencies. Why was Archie's birth certificate sealed, then amended? Why did Lilibet's christening lack verifiable witnesses? Why has no candid photo of the children ever surfaced from Montecito? where paparazzi stalk every inch of ground. It wasn't just the question. It was the timing. Meghan had been working hard to rebrand herself. New business ventures, lifestyle projects, charitable causes, all anchored by her identity as a mother. So when Courtney stripped that identity down to a single, piercing question, the foundation trembled. And the audience felt it. You could almost sense their collective realization. They weren't just watching a Q&A. They were watching a truth quake in real time. Hours later, Courtney posted a photo from the event on her Instagram. Just a simple caption, "Lovely afternoon in Montecito. Always believe in asking what matters." No hashtags. No mention of Meghan. But the comment section exploded. "You asked the question we all wanted to ask," one follower wrote. Another added, "Bravery looks like honesty." That post vanished within 48 hours. Deleted without explanation. Coincidence? Or quiet pressure? Insiders began whispering that Meghan felt betrayed, that she called mutual friends to ask why Courtney would do that to her. Some claimed Meghan accused Courtney of feeding gossip blogs. Others said she simply cried, muttering that she'd been set up. But the truth was simpler and more dangerous. Meghan wasn't set up by anyone. She was undone by her own discomfort. Because when you live behind carefully constructed walls, even a single crack can let the light and the truth flood in. In the days that followed, headlines softened the blow, calling the moment awkward, unexpected, a human slip. But social media didn't let it go. People kept rewatching, analyzing, discussing. Did you notice how her smile dropped? Why didn't she mention Archie's name once? For the first time in years, Meghan didn't control the conversation. The conversation controlled her. And that's when things began to spiral quietly behind the scenes. Phone calls were made. Emails sent. The video vanished from Godmother's Bookstore's YouTube channel. Staff were instructed not to comment. But one employee, anonymously, leaked a detail that set off alarm bells. The question wasn't cut from the event. It was erased entirely from the master file. Erased, as if it had never happened. But the internet remembers everything. Clips that attendees had recorded on their phones resurfaced on TikTok, stitched with slow-motion reactions and dramatic music. Within days, millions had watched Meghan's moment of silence. Millions had seen the Duchess of Sussex, always polished, always poised, momentarily lost. That's when the real investigation began. Not from the press, not from tabloids, but from the public. From people who had watched her for years and suddenly saw something new. Vulnerability? Guilt? Fear? Whatever it was, it didn't look like confidence. The woman who had once spoken about the importance of owning your truth suddenly looked like she didn't recognize hers. And that's what made the moment unforgettable. Because it wasn't just a question. It was a mirror. And for the first time, Meghan Markle couldn't look into it without flinching. But if you think this was just an awkward Q&A gone wrong, think again. Because what happened next would shake both Montecito and London. The palace, once silent about Meghan's post-royal life, suddenly began asking quiet questions of their own. Whispers of verification, records, and representation began surfacing behind closed doors. And as the world debated whether Courtney Adamo had overstepped, something much bigger was brewing in the shadows. Because that one question didn't just stop the room, it started a fire. And what came next would burn through every layer of the story until nothing was left but truth. No one saw it coming. That's the thought that kept ricocheting around the room long after the applause died, long after the latte foam settled into a creamy spiral, long after the cameras stopped pretending to be flies on the wall. Are you a mother? It sounded simple. It wasn't. Not in Lore Keepers, not on that afternoon, not from the lips of the woman who asked it. Her name was Courtney Adamo. And if you're sitting there wondering who she is, if she's just a plant, a schemer, a friend turned Judas, hold that thought. Because the truth about Courtney isn't loud. It's quiet. It's precise. It's the sound of a fountain pen scratching against paper at midnight. It's the crisp press of linen napkins at a dinner no one will ever photograph. It's the way old histories slip, uninvited, into our new lives. Let's rewind. College days. Before the branded candles, before the tastefully neutral kitchens and the staged candidates. Coraline and Mara shared a hallway of blue doors and bad ideas. Coraline was the one with ink on her fingers and a camera in her tote bag. Mara, yes, our Mara Kingsley, was the one everyone noticed first. Remembered smile. Impeccable timing. The way her laugh could seize a room like lighting does a skyline. Coraline kept notes. Not on Mara. On the world. On the way people pretended in order to survive. She called them pretenses then, as if naming them loosened their grip. She loved patterns. She loved days that repeated like a song you knew you hadn't heard before. And she loved Mara. The way you love someone who blushes when you praise them and stiffens when you ask how they really are. Maybe you've had a friend like that. The person who holds your secrets like fragile glass and still, somehow, always taps the rim to see if it rings. Years pass. Lives happen. One of them learns to be watched. The other learns to watch. Mara, adored on screens and stages, designs a new self the way architects design museums, with reverence, with engineering, with controlled light. Coraline moves through cities like a shadow chasing a lamplight. She marries a man who loves her spine straightness and the way she says no. She has children who teach her that time is both a thief and an alchemist. She posts photographs that you swear you can hear, laughter caught in grain and sun. And then, at some silent midpoint between who they were and who they became, their lives drift. Pause here. Ask yourself, which friend do you become when the distance starts? The one who calls anyway? Or the one who curates? Coraline called. Sometimes. Not a lot. Enough to know when Mara's voice tilted toward performance. Enough to know when the pauses grew padded. Enough to sense, before the magazines and the think pieces and the kitchen table debates, that some rooms in Mara's new house of self were walled in mirrors. So when the invite came, would you moderate? Low-key. Local. We'll laugh about dorm corridor pizza. Coraline said yes. Not out of malice. Out of a superstition older than loyalty. If you love a person who is drifting away, ask them something true before they're too far to hear it. Lorekeeper's bookshop on Alder Street is all warm oak and honey light, capped by a ceiling that looks like a retired chapel. It has a bell that rings like a small brass whisper when you open the door. The owner, Penn, wears reading glasses on a leather cord and knows which stool's wobble is fixed by the folded coaster. There's a chalkboard near the espresso machine where kids write their favorite words. Someone had written chrysalis in lime green. Someone else drew a cocoon. Coraline arrived early. She always does. Not to study the room. To listen to the room. Every space has a personality. She can tell by the way people settle their bags, by the way steam climbs from cups. That day, people settled softly, as if their bodies knew something their minds hadn't caught up to. Expectation has a weight. Don't you feel it right now? How your shoulders lift a fraction when you know a moment might matter. She had a notebook. Of course she did. A small black one, creased at the spine, soft from years of pocket writing. She had her questions written in a grid. Entertaining. Hospitality versus hosting. What the word refuge means when your home is your brand. The way recipes travel from grandmother's kitchen to a camera's mouth. All safe. All sincere. And then, at the bottom, like a marble among marbles that's just a little heavier, one line. Does the title fit the life? She hadn't written Mother. She hadn't written Mara. She had written title. Life. The tension between label and lived experience. She could have asked it about anything. Spouse. Activist. Neighbor. Friend. She thought she'd let the conversation decide which door the question knocked on. Are you thinking this sounds too innocent? That she planned more than she'll admit? Maybe. Everyone plans a little when the stakes are disguised as ambience. But the truth is stranger and smaller. Coraline loves questions that leave space around them. They invite answers to grow. Or to crumble. When Mara walked in, the room sighed in that way rooms do when a famous person brings their gravity. She wore cream. Not white. Cream, like the memory of snow. She greeted Penn. She touched the bell and smiled at its ring. She took her seat and did that thing she does where she looks into a person's face like they're the only one in the world. If you've never seen charm up close, let me tell you, it is a craft, it is a ballet, it is a war conducted with velvet. The first questions felt like candlelight. Cozy, non-threatening. Talk to me about a dinner that turned into a story. What's your worst entertaining mishap? How do you make space for people who arrive carrying a day heavier than they can say? Mara offered anecdotes like almonds, in measured handfuls, salted just enough. People laughed. People nodded. Even Coraline, twice, couldn't help it. Then the talk eased toward family. Not as a trap, as the natural shoreline of a life built around the idea of home. And here is a surprising fact you might not expect. Coraline told herself she wasn't going to ask anything she couldn't answer about her own life. That's how she decides what's fair. She's asked herself that very question at 2 a.m. with a feverish toddler in her lap. Does the title fit the life? I call myself a mother. Does it fit me at 2 p.m. in the cereal aisle? At 6 a.m. on the soccer field? At midnight, when I do not feel like magic or infinite patience or even a decent human being? Some days the answer is yes. Some days the answer is a vow to try again tomorrow. So she asked it, not as a verdict, as a door. Mara, are you a mother? You saw what happened on the surface. The blink, the laugh that didn't land, the sentence that substituted children in general for the two names the room expected to hear. But you didn't see Coraline's chest tighten as if a violin string stretched inside it. She's known Mara long enough to recognize the exact shade of smile that means please don't look behind this. Tell me you've never recognized that smile on someone you love. After the event, when the room exhaled and people collected their bags and half-finished tea, Coraline walked to the back, past the romance shelf and the wobbly stool, into the little office where Pen keeps the ledger and the jar of bookmarks. She closed the door. The sound wrapped around her like felt. She replayed the question in her head. Not the words. The intention. Did she ask it to hold Mara to her story? Or to free her from it? She didn't get far before Mara stepped in, the door closing with a hush that books admire. Cor. Mara's voice was warm, then wavered. That was a lot. Coraline sat on the edge of Pen's desk. What part? The part where you asked if I'm a mother. I didn't ask if you're a good mother. That's not what it felt like. Silence is elastic. It can stretch, and it can snap. This one stretched far enough to make both women feel their old selves reaching for each other through a fog of newer selves. Do you want to know why I asked? Coraline said. No, Mara said, too quickly. Then, softer, yes. Because I wanted to hear you say it in a way that convinced you. Mara looked like a person who has been asked to lift a box they packed themselves and no longer remember what's inside. Sometimes, Coraline continued, we build the perfect sentence. And then we live under it. And it gets heavy. Mara's eyes shone. Not with tears. With calculation. With the quick math of image and intimacy. She took a breath that sounded like the sea pulling back before it hurls itself forward. Of all people, she said, I thought you'd protect me. From what? Coraline asked. From the parts of my story that don't belong to strangers. Then tell me which parts belong to you. Coraline said. I'll lock the rest in Pen's ledger and throw away the key. Mara shook her head, the glossy curtain of hair masking, briefly, her face. You wouldn't understand. Try me. Mara's voice softened into the old dorm night register, where girls' plan lives in the currency of wishes. I'm doing what I have to do. Everyone thinks they understand that sentence until they have to live inside it. Now, if you're wondering whether Coraline walked out furious, triumphant, vindicated, no. She walked out hungry. Not for gossip. For coherence. Because love doesn't stop asking questions when the answers are inconvenient. It just asks them more carefully. That's when the messages began. You saw the public post and its deletion. You didn't see the texts with timestamps and half-typed ellipses. The friends who wrote, what happened? The strangers who demanded, how dare you? The one number she didn't recognize that sent a single sentence. She needed the question. Coraline saved them all. She's a keeper by design. Photographs in shoeboxes. Ticket stubs in envelopes. Screen grabs in folders named with quiet defiance. Context. When something rocks the ground under your feet, you keep receipts the way sailors keep rope. 2 days after Lorekeepers, Coraline took a train to the city with the most windows. She sat in a cafe that sells time by the hour and coffee by the smile. She opened a fresh notebook. Who is Mara to me? The question looked uncomfortably at her, like a dog caught in the wrong yard. She didn't start with adjectives. She started with scenes. The night Mara slept on her couch because a headline felt like a hurricane and her own bed felt like a boat. The morning Mara forwarded a stranger's long email about hope and wrote, "This made me remember." The laugh in the back stairwell when the fire alarm locked them out and they ate vending machine crackers like they were banquet food. None of these fit in magazines. All of them fit inside love. What would you write if you had to list someone by their moments and not their myths? Coraline kept writing. When I asked the question, I wanted her to rest in the answer like a porch in summer. When she answered, she looked like a person on a tightrope insisting they're on a sidewalk. She capped the pen. She didn't cry. People imagine conscience is a flood. It's really a slow drip faucet you keep meaning to fix. The next morning, the story began to shift in the outside world. Not because Coraline said anything, because silence has a way of amplifying the wrong chorus. Op-eds with tidy outrage. Threads with braided evidence. People who loved Mara turned into juries in the time it takes to refresh a feed. People who disliked her built bonfires of confirmation bias. The internet, hungry, efficient, eager, ate nuance for breakfast. Have you ever watched a narrative outrun the people inside it? It's like watching your own shadow sprint ahead of you at sunset. It looks larger, more dramatic, more ominous. It looks true, until you trip on a route the shadow never showed you. Coraline could have posted. She could have explained. She didn't. Maybe you'll disagree with this choice. Maybe you'll think it was cowardice or strategy. It was neither. It was a quiet refusal to break a friendship on the altar of everyone else's appetite. But quiet doesn't mean still. Coraline started asking questions, just not on Instagram. Not to tabloids. To the only people she trusts with complicated answers. The ones who tell her when she is being unfair. She called Sarah. The friend who reads everyone's eyes before she listens to their words. Sarah asked, "Did you plan the question to make a point?" "I planned it to make space." "Did you leave room for her to walk back out?" "Yes." "Did you close the door behind her?" There are the questions that sting. And then there are the questions that salt the sting so you remember it. "I don't know," Coraline said. Sarah breathed, the kind of breath that cleans a window. Then ask her again. Ask in private. Ask without the room watching. The advice felt both obvious and heroic. Do the unspectacular work of truth. Coraline texted Mara. "Just coffee? My corner." No microphones. No reply. She tried again the next day. No reply. By the fourth day, the blue bubbles looked like a parade of apologies. And that's when something odd happened. A package arrived. No return address. Just Coraline's name in handwriting that could have been anyone's, which of course means it was someone's carefully disguised. Inside, a single photograph, printed on thick matte paper, the kind a careful person orders. Two women in their 20s, sprawled on a thrift store couch, laughing at something off camera. A pizza box open on the table. A notebook open on the cushion. One of the women had ink on her fingers. The other had that bellyache, head back, reckless laugh. On the back, in a blocky, non-habitual script, 5 words. "You asked me once, remember?" Coraline held the photograph and time folded, origami style, into a crane that looked like a memory. She had asked, back then, to Mara, about a part she coveted, about whether fame was a kind of hunger or a cure for it. The answer had been a confession whispered into shared late-night air. "I want it because I don't know what else to want." Does the title fit the life? The problem with old questions is that they grow teeth when you meet them again as an adult. That evening, Coraline took a walk. No headphones. No phone. Just her, the sound of her own shoes, and the kind of dusk that gives everything a gentler outline. She found herself at the small park with the iron fountain where her kids once believed pennies could buy wishes if you threw them hard enough. A boy on a scooter zoomed past her and shouted, "Watch me." She did. He wobbled, corrected, flew on. Balance looks easier from the sidelines. She went home and wrote a letter. Not an email. A letter. Pen. Ink. Paper thick enough to stand up to truth. She wrote the way people write when they've decided to be the kind of adult they needed as a child. Kind and unsparing. "Mara, I asked you a question I should have asked on a couch, not in a room with strangers. That is my mistake. I asked because I believed you wanted to be held to a version of your life you once promised yourself. That is my hope. If I'm wrong, tell me. If I'm right, come sit at my table and say it out loud until it stops trembling. If the title fits, you won't need me to defend it. If it doesn't, I will sit beside you while you find the one that does. Love, Cor." She sealed it with plain tape. No flourish. Walked it to the blue mailbox at the corner. Slid it into the dark. Have you ever felt relief and dread shake hands in your chest? That's what it felt like. Days lengthened and shortened the way they do when you are waiting for a thing that may not come. Coraline kept living. School pickups. Meetings. A deadline that didn't care about her interior storms. That's the ridiculous miracle of life. It refuses to pause because your heart needs intermission. Then, a message. Not from Mara. From a number she knew, the kind that appears in your phone with a name, but with the emotional weight of a locked drawer. "Livia." Mara's once assistant, now brand coordinator. A phrase that always sounded to Coraline like a nice way to say we make sure the image holds. Can we talk? Off record. They met at a diner where the coffee is always better than you expect, and the pie looks like it remembers the 1970s. Livia stirred sugar like it was a nervous habit she'd been issued by HR. I don't want to hurt her, Livia said before the plates even landed. I don't want to either, Coraline said. That's why we're here. Livia looked at the stainless steel napkin holder like it might have opinions. Livia started, then stopped, then tried again. She's built rooms she can't get out of without knocking down walls people are standing against. Some of those people are very small. Coraline felt the sentence sit in her lungs like weather. Are you asking me to stop asking questions? She said. I'm asking you to pick questions that carry ladders, not hammers. Is there a door? Livia swallowed. There might be, but if there is, it's behind something that looks a lot like pride. They paid. They left too much tip because sometimes you try to balance the ledger of the day in the only place you can. Outside, the city tugged at their coats and pretended it didn't overhear. That night, Coraline didn't sleep. Not the heroic kind of insomnia where you solve your life. The ordinary kind where thoughts pace like shoes in the apartment upstairs. Around 3, she stood at the sink with a glass of water and admitted to the tile what she hadn't admitted yet to herself. Part of the reason she asked the question in public was because she was afraid she'd lose her nerve in private. You ever done that? Used an audience as a crutch? It works until it doesn't. And then it breaks something you meant to mend. Morning delivered a small white envelope with her own handwriting on the front and a stamp she chose because it had a moon. Inside, her letter, returned. On the back, in Mara's hand, 3 words. Not your decision. Coraline sat at the kitchen table while the kettle forgot to whistle. She read the words again. Not your decision. A verdict. A boundary. A dare. Sometimes a sentence like that closes the book. Sometimes it opens another chapter you didn't plan to write. She looked at the photograph again. The couch, the laugh, the notebook open to the first page of a life they didn't yet know they were outlining. She thought about the titles people adopt like armor. Mother, advocate, host. She thought about the way even true titles can chafe when you wear them for someone else's gaze. She picked up a pen and wrote on the back of the returned envelope. It isn't my decision. It is my question. She tucked the envelope back into the drawer where she keeps the shoelaces and spare keys. She made tea. She looked out the window and watched an early bird risk the neighbor's cat with the kind of audacity that only hunger can defend. By afternoon, the internet had found a new obsession and the old one had cooled to a simmer. That's what storms do. They don't end. They move. Coraline answered emails. She finished a pitch. She replaced the burned-out bulb in the hallway. She did not, for once, check her phone every 6 minutes. At 5:30, her doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. She wiped her hands on a dish towel like someone on television who has done something brave without yet realizing it. Through the peephole, a courier, pink-cheeked, apologetic. Package for Ms. Ames. Please sign. Inside the padded envelope, another photograph, this one on glossy paper. No note. No handwriting. Just the image. Mara at Lorekeepers. Coraline beside her. Mara's face mid-smile, mid-win, mid-life. Coraline leaning forward, eyes not at Mara, but past her, towards something just outside the frame. What were you looking at? The picture seemed to ask. What's always just outside the frame when 2 women who loved each other learn how to tell the truth without breaking what the lie built? Coraline turned the photo over in her hands and suddenly noticed it. A reflection. There, in the metallic curve of the espresso machine, warped but unmistakable, a third figure near the counter. A figure holding a phone not like an audience member sneaking a clip, but like a professional. Wide stance. Both hands. Barely visible badge on a lanyard. Someone else had been watching the room watching them. Her heart did that animal thing hearts do when they realize they're not alone. Not friendship. Not nostalgia. Not the internet's glare. Something colder. Institutional. Interested in more than candor. She held the photograph up to the kitchen light. The lanyard glinted. Not a logo she recognized. Not media, not store staff. The badge had a barcode, a line of text too blurred to read. And above it, a small emblem that looked less like branding and more like a seal of permission. Who else had needed that question asked? Coraline placed the photo flat on the table, The espresso machine reflection, a tiny metallic witness to a larger, hidden audience. She felt equal parts vindicated and endangered, like a person who has stumbled onto a documentary already in progress. Who sent this? Why send it now? Was it a warning? A proof? A threat wrapped as a gift? She reached for her phone to text Sarah, then stopped. There are moments you must sit with alone, not because solitude is noble, but because fresh truth is fragile and panics when handled by many hands too quickly. If someone else was invested in the fault line between Mara's title and Mara's life, then Coraline's question had been less a spark and more a lit match tossed into a room where gas had already been hissing, silent, patient. Do you feel that? The way the story's air just changed? Coraline stood, walked to the drawer with the spare keys and the returned letter, and slid the new photograph in beside them. Keys, letter, image, a small altar to the part of love that is interrogation and protection. Then she did the simplest brave thing she could do. She sat down and began a new letter. Not to Mara, to herself. Ask the next question. Ask it kindly. Ask it in a way that builds a door. And be ready if someone else answers first. Because what came next would change everything. And for once, it wouldn't be Coraline or Mara who decided how. What makes a persona work? Is it the story or the silence around the story? Is it the polished image or the way our longing fills the gaps the image leaves behind? Mara Kingsley didn't just adopt the title. She curated the atmosphere that title requires. Motherhood wasn't a role, it was a set design. Soft lighting, neutral tones, handmade mugs that looked imperfect on purpose. This wasn't an accident. This was technique. But techniques, when overused, become tells. Let's begin with a simple scene you could scroll past 100 times. A kitchen counter at magic hour. The sunlight is melting across a row of glass jars. There's a cutting board with half-sliced strawberries, the knife placed just so. In the frame, a woman's hand. In the caption, a sentence about gratitude, morning routines, and the sacred slowness of family life. It's lovely. It's effective. And yet, if you look long enough, you notice the absence. No messy spill. No child's elbow invading the shot. No mismatched plastic cup you forgot to hide. It's motherhood without entropy. You see it now, don't you? The way the image keeps removing life until only the mood remains. Mara's motherhood persona began years earlier, in the first post-spotlight lull, when she needed to reintroduce herself to the public without re-entering the arena that had bruised her. She did what clever, wounded people do. She changed the spotlight. She turned it into a lamp. She turned the arena into a living room. She began to speak the language of home. There are pillars to this language. You might recognize them because they are as old as advertising and as new as a morning scroll. The first pillar is ritual. Audiences don't fall in love with your days. They fall in love with the way your days repeat. Monday tea with orange peel and 2 cloves. Tuesday pancakes, extra butter, always on the blue plate. Wednesday walk at 7 o'clock, same route, same tree, same bench, same caption about noticing the tiny miracles. Rituals seduce us because they promise a gravity strong enough to hold us in a spinning world. The second pillar is vulnerability with guardrails. The story of the hard day, told with a soft landing. We were up all night, paired with a picture of roses on the windowsill. Parenting is chaotic, paired with a neatly stacked shelf of wooden toys in a palette of oat milk and whisper. You show just enough mess to be adored, not enough to be questioned. The third pillar is testimony. Not the court kind, the revival kind. I used to be this, now I'm that. It's not about facts, it's about redemption. One day you post a photo of your face unclothed by makeup. The next day you write that you've learned to wear your life the way your skin wears sunlight. It's beautiful. It's also strategically bulletproof. Who argues with redemption? Mara built with all 3 pillars. And for a while, it worked. Her audience breathed in the aesthetic like a lived-in candle. Brands partnered. Interviews invited. Magazines published spreads titled Home, but with a capital H. But a persona isn't just what you build, it's what you defend. If your identity is a house, who's allowed to knock? Who's allowed to see the closets? Who gets to sit in the kitchen when everything burns? She learned this the hard way when the first hairline fracture appeared. It wasn't a headline. It was a comment, low in a stack of praise. A gentler voice than a critic's. Your mornings look so peaceful, the commenter wrote. I don't see the kids, though. Is that on purpose? A small question. Not a chisel. More like a fingernail gently testing whether paint has dried. Mara replied with the answer you'd expect. Privacy. She said it softly, the way one says grace over bread. Yes, she wrote. We keep the family moments to ourselves. But I love sharing the rhythm of home. No one can argue with that, not truly. Protecting children is virtue. The persona strengthened. It learned how to turn away questions and bless itself at the same time. Then came the collaborations. Mom approved brands with prices that waltzed just high enough to feel aspirational, but not enough to become vulgar. Eco-laundries. Ceramics thrown by artisans who prefer the word potter. A sponsored post with a stroller photographed in a room no stroller has ever actually been in. It's fine. Everyone understands how the machine works. Influence is a marketplace. Motherhood is a currency. And still, if you watch closely, the apostrophe shifted. It became motherhood's. Possessive. The image possessed the life, not the other way around. Here's a surprising fact. The more Mara spoke about home, the less her friends talked to her about it. Coraline noticed first. Their messages pivoted from kids to campaigns, from recipes to releases. When Coraline asked for a photo of the new pantry, Mara sent a mood board. That's not a crime. It's a clue. Maybe you've done this. Maybe you've replaced evidence with atmosphere when the evidence didn't cooperate. When the Lorekeepers event cracked the veneer, people assumed the fracture began there. It didn't. It began the night Mara realized her life had become a series of captures, not events. She told a confidant, third hand, then fourth hand, that she felt like a cinematographer trapped inside a mother's body. That's not a cruel sentence. It's a sad one. It's also a dangerous one if you're trying to live up to the title you carry. Let's talk about pictures again, because the visual is the persona's bloodstream. There are three kinds of family photos in the glossy world Mara curated: the silhouette, the talisman, and the suggestion. The silhouette is an outline, a child seen from behind, standing at a window, hands pressed to glass, the light bathing everything in the mercy of anonymity. They're beautiful. They're safe. They are also a way of keeping your audience in love with an idea rather than a person. The talisman is an object charged with implied presence. A pair of tiny shoes on a mat. A small sweater draped over a chair. Crayons in a ceramic cup on a table no one draws at. These objects do more than represent. They reassure. Someone's small lives here. Believe me, the suggestion is language without proof. We. Us. Little hands. Bedtime giggles. She writes them in captions that tremble with poetry. You can almost hear the laughter. Almost. Most of us use these devices when we need to. It becomes a problem when the devices become the life. Coraline, after the event, watched with an editor's eye. She'd scroll through Mara's weeks and mark the beats the way a physician tracks vital signs. She wasn't hunting. She was measuring. 3 silhouettes. For talismans. 6 suggestions. Not a single candid chaos. No spilled milk. No marker on the couch. No shadow of a flash dive under the bed. Her own camera roll, by contrast, was a battlefield of toothpaste blobs, homework tantrums, and the occasional miraculous sunset that tried its best to redeem the day and usually succeeded. So she did what friends with boundaries and binoculars do. She went quiet and she took notes. Not to publish. To pray with. You keep track of what breaks your heart, so you remember where to aim the mending. Remember Livia's sentence? She's built rooms she can't get out of without knocking down walls people are standing against. That's the thing about a persona. It's not just yours. It's scaffolding built around a whole team. The architect gets credit. The crew holds the weight. Assistants, managers, strategists, photographers, even the guy who moves the lamp 2 inches to the left so the lemon looks like it was born to glow. When your identity feeds a payroll, truth becomes a liability line item. But it wasn't only payroll. It was penance. The motherhood persona was the apology letter Mara never wrote out loud. To fans she had disappointed. To an industry she had exited aggressively. To herself, for wanting a sanctuary big enough to hide in. She once said, on a panel, into a microphone tuned for absolution. Motherhood saved me. People stood. They clapped. They wept. It's hard to clap and ask for receipts at the same time. Receipts began to appear. Not the kind you file for accountants. The kind that live in the corners of photographs like accidental witnesses. Coraline noticed the same 3 books reappeared in the background of every bedtime story post. never out of order, never on the floor with a page tragically torn. She noticed a high chair that never aged out, the way children do. She noticed shadows that fell in the exact same line on the exact same rug at different times of day, as if the sun had developed loyalty to a schedule no orbit obeys. Is this proof of anything? Not by itself. But patterns aren't verdicts until they are. And the more Mara doubled down on the motherhood persona, the more the world asked to see the life inside the costume. You know how this goes. Audiences are tidal. They sweep forward with devotion and then snatch back with doubt. And sometimes they're unfair. And sometimes they're right. One afternoon, Coraline met Sarah on a bench near a pond with a goose so territorial it should have paid rent. They ate apples out of habit and talked like people do who love someone they're not sure they recognize anymore. Is it possible, Coraline asked, that she's living the life she's showing, just at a distance? What does that mean? Sarah said, that the image is true but the experience is incomplete, like a marriage built on beautifully written vows and not enough conversations. Sarah chewed. Do you want her to invite you in? I want her to invite herself out, Coraline said. Out of the room she built, they watched the goose chase a child with a courageous stick and a parent with immediate regret. What happens when your image becomes too loved to leave? What happens when sponsors expect the serene kitchen, not the sink filled with pots that teach you humility? What happens when followers say, "You inspire me," and what they mean is, "Please never show me a truth that contradicts the poem I used to survive my own day"? Mara began to live under the weight of that expectation. You could see it in the way her captions lengthened, each one a small essay about meaning. This is what people do when they can't show proof. They add philosophy. It's not a scam. It's a reflex. If I can't invite you to see, I will invite you to feel. Then came the interview that almost said the quiet part out loud. A glossy magazine sat Mara in a white chair in a white room in a white dress and asked her about family. She said the line that publicists dream up and poets resent. Privacy isn't absence. It's intimacy with intention. It's a beautiful sentence. It also puts your brain in a friendly chokehold. Intimacy with intention. The interview trended for days. Livia texted Coraline a single eye-roll emoji and then apologized for texting at all. Here's where the contradictions got heavier. Mara said, in a different interview, that she wakes to the sound of footsteps outside her door. But earlier that month, she had posted about loving the slow mornings when the house sleeps and she drinks tea alone in the dark. Could both be true? Of course. Could both be strategic? Also, of course. That's the trouble with a persona. It encourages you to live the kind of truth that refuses to be pinned to a corkboard. Around this time, Coraline received a message from someone she hadn't heard from since the kind of wedding where vows fight the DJ for attention. Lions, but everyone calls him Lion, had once been Mara's go-to photographer for the kind of photo that looks like winter learning to smile. He's the one who knows where the light hides in a house that isn't telling you yet. He left the inner circle a year ago to shoot landscapes, so empty they make your lungs ache. He wrote, "You ever feel like a room is staged for someone who isn't there?" Coraline answered, "Every hotel lobby." He didn't laugh. Text bubbles are terrible at timing. He responded with a picture. Not to share. To show. A room that looked like Mara's living room looked in every post. Same vase. Same books. Same bowl of lemons performing optimism. But the rug's corners were taped down with gaffer tape. The perfect pile of blankets was pinned at the back the way stylists do when gravity disobeys. The lemons were plastic. The date stamp said it was taken at midnight. Coraline typed and erased 3 versions of the same sentence. "Why are you telling me this?" He saved her the trouble. "I got tired of participating in a poem that forbids weather." Is that a betrayal? Is it enough to make you doubt everything? It depends on your appetite for complexity. The existence of staging doesn't prove the absence of children. It proves the presence of control. And control is a kind of hunger too. Coraline sat with that for a week. During that week, the city rained and then stopped like it couldn't commit. She did the school run. She forgot the milk and then remembered at the register 2 customers too late. She thought about the quiet labor of real days, the way they ask for your soul's shape without ever clapping for you. And she thought about Mara, living in a room that applauded. She drafted 3 messages to Mara and sent none. She wrote essays she didn't publish. She rewatched the Lorekeeper's clip and hated what it made her feel. She wasn't a detective. She was a friend trying to locate a voice inside a symphony of curated sound. Then came the brand film. Not a commercial. A story. You know the kind. For minutes long. Misty piano. Narration that makes your ribcage feel like it's learning a new word. The film followed Mara from dawn to nightfall as she moved through a home that looked like an art project about mercy. She poured tea. She wrote in a journal. She walked through a garden with a wicker basket bereft of dirt. She paused at a window. The camera lingered on her hand, resting on a child's drawing stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like an apple.